Well, Alpesh is here. Alpesh B.Patel, of course, from the Prifinium Partners. Thank you very much indeed for joining us this Friday morning, Alpesh. OK, kick us off then with the Eurozone debt crisis. Have they got it right? It's austerity or nothing?
Can I just say, for all the viewers, they're absolutely fed up with the European story. They're absolutely right to be, because it's completely irrelevant. It shouldn't be on the front page of any of the newspapers, and let me tell you why. This notion of, oh, are we going to have 0.7% growth or 0.1% to the nth decimal place? I'll tell you why it's irrelevant, because even if we have zero growth, we will still have $12 trillion worth of goods and services produced in the EU. $12 trillion without any growth. So we don't get 0.1% growth. So what? We still got $12 trillion of
like
activity.
Some job creation. What about a bit of job creation?
Well, you can still have job maintenance in this environment, and you've got unemployment levels below 10% in most of the European economies. What more do you want? Particularly given that we have business cycles now and again. You can't keep on having job growth and economic growth every single year. It's all right if we pause for a year. And it's not just that. China imports the equivalent of a Greece every 9 months. Every 9 months imports the equivalent of a Greece in terms of GDP. So if you wiped Greece off the face of the earth, other than the Greeks, nobody else would care. It wouldn't matter.
The global economy is just going to meander its way along, no matter what. Low
it's
growth,
not even meandering.
growth.
It's booming. It's probably going to have global GDP. It's probably going to be about 3%. And unfortunately, journalists in newspapers don't recognise that there is a world outside of Europe, which is doing not too badly, thank you very much. The Americans, $14 trillion worth of goods and services without all this sideshow of Greece. And again, I'll mention China. I'm not saying China's going to save the world, but I'll mention China again. It produces an Italy every 2 years. So Italy, boom, goes off the face of the earth, doesn't matter. China produces a new Italy every 2 years in terms of
the world's 8th largest economy you're talking about.
Yes, well, it gets produced every 2 years by Chinese growth alone. It can be the 8th largest, it can be the 2nd largest for all I care. It's irrelevant because it gets produced through global growth in any event. We live in unique times, not because Europe's in trouble, but because the rest of the world is actually doing rather well.
I suppose we should therefore skip over S&P and Paris and go to the China Daily then. And so when a Chinese central banker calls for more clarity from Europe, what's he after? Well,
let's mention that just very briefly, the France thing. Of course, you couldn't make this up, that they accidentally downgraded it. But the reason I want to mention France goes back to my previous argument. What was the rating that the French still have? AAA. If you read the papers, you'd think they were junk bond status. No, AAA is what they've got, the highest possible rating. And the French were a little bit miffed that somebody was going to take that off them, and quite right too.
But also, the credit rating agencies making mistakes.
Yeah.
Well, you know, web people, they probably outsourced it somewhere, didn't they? China Daily,
what sort of clarity, as Martin was saying, what sort of clarity is China looking for?
Well, on this, what the Chinese are actually saying is we want to negotiate. We're not just going to open up our $2.5 trillion worth of reserves. Sorry, I think it's $3 trillion worth of reserves. That's reserves, foreign currency reserves, larger than any other country in the world, and they of course own a heck of a lot of dollars, so they want to diversify. They've been actually buying euros for a long time, but we go to them cap in hand from Europe and say, can we actually have a bit of that money? They're not going to say yes, yes, of course, but of course they do need our $12 trillion in trade. You know why? Because we're double the size of China economically. Despite all the problems you hear about Europe, you'd think we were some kind of banana republic in the EU, certainly the way it seems to be run, but we're not. We're double the size of China, which means that they're very interested in lending money to the EU, not least because we buy so many of their imports, which allows them to build up these foreign reserves.
And very quickly, what do they want in return?
Oh, they'll want lots of our assets. Of course they will. They will basically do to us in Europe what Europe was trying to do to China a couple of centuries ago.
Let's turn to the news of the world hacking scandal. An investigation underway at the moment, and a lot of inconsistencies in terms of what is being said. And the question is, who's telling the truth?
How very polite of you to call them inconsistencies. Well, in the newspaper, the question is who is lying. And I have to say, you've got a lovely picture in The Independent. There's a barrister. There's the editor of the newspaper, which you wouldn't trust so much because he's an editor of a newspaper. And then you've got the CEO of the company. Between the barrister, speaking as a barrister myself, and the CEO of a news organisation, I know who I'm going to trust. It's going to be the barrister in case there's any doubts. And it doesn't look good for the CEO. The only thing is, if Daddy didn't own the company, the CEO would be out on his ear, because there is no CEO who is going to be able to withstand in any normal company.
Well, there has been shareholder pressure. I mean, as you rightly say, of course, the ownership of the company almost precludes him being pushed out, but there may be enough shareholder pressure to achieve that.
Quite right. And would it be good for the company? I suspect. A little bit like Berlusconi leaving Italy, it'll give people a nice feeling, and especially if they put in fresh management. I think actually it'll be very good for the share price of News Corp.
Just very briefly, you've mentioned Berlusconi leaving Italy, Mario Monti, the prospect of Mario Monti taking the helm, and also in Greece, of course, another economist, Lucas Papademos. But both of those men have a lot of credibility as economists within the Eurozone.
Yeah.
But is that enough? Is that what's needed now, an economist?
No, it won't be enough for these economies, because it's a task which goes beyond the individual. And not only that, sooner or later they're going to have to print money regardless of who's in there. And we're not suddenly going to think, oh yes, let's loan them lots of money at cheap rates because they've got an economist in. The thing with the CEO of a company is you've got a bigger gene pool to pick from, and you might actually get somebody who will be able to look as if they got their hands on the reins, and they know when, as one MP put it, they're in charge of a criminal organisation, which was a bit extreme, I think, actually, in all fairness to James Murdoch, who actually hasn't done a bad job other than this small little problem.
Mm-hmm. International Herald Tribune. Doesn't your heart slightly go out to Governor Perry? I mean, we've all been in that position.
No, wait a minute. It's not like the Republicans to have somebody intellectually vacuous as a candidate for president. I mean, I think of the intellectual giants such as Sarah Palin, such as George W. Bush. This is an aberration for the Republicans.
Is there a tone of irony in your voice?
No, certainly not. Well, the Americans won't get it if there is irony anyway, so it won't matter.
You know what's interesting about this is the power of the televised debate in the US race.
They say it's won, as from the day Kennedy versus Nixon, they say it's won by that killer phrase. And there was, you'll remember the ones, Bob Dole, where the candidate turned to him and said, "You're no Kennedy," and so on and so forth. There is that phrase. If you can get that killer punch, here the chap was punching himself by the looks of it. He just couldn't remember which was the third agency.
Government agency, yeah.
And somebody said education, and he seemed to agree.
Is that it for him? Does that put pay to his chances, would you say?
Well, it's a big field, actually, so I think even without this, he didn't really stand a chance. There's about 11 or 12 of them vying to be president in the from the Republican Party.
All right, the Duchess of Cambridge, you've got 30 seconds.
Yes.
Wearing a toga.
Well, wearing a toga, most importantly, wearing a poppy. It is Remembrance Day today, and it's not just Remembrance Day for the British soldiers who fought in the 2 World Wars and the campaigns since as well, but also Commonwealth soldiers, of course, and I mention that because this is the future Queen of Australia here, and doesn't she look absolutely lovely? And it's wonderful
in a costume that perhaps is a sort of backhanded support to ancient Greece.
Actually, I was thinking it's from a student frat party.
Thank you,
Might be wrong.
Alpesh Patel, thank you very much indeed, and thank you for being with us.